Hello. About 4 or 5 months ago, we purchased a half a cow, and that was a pretty good experience because it lasted us, our family of eight, it lasted us about 4 months, I would say. Now, I did purchase other meats, during that 4 month period. So it wasn't like we were just eating beef, but still, I felt like, it was definitely worth it. So we decided to go ahead. We have another local farmer that we typically go to, and we purchased a full cow from him. And about 3 weeks ago, we were able to get the processed cow and bring it home. And I just wanted to share a few tips that I picked up in the process of doing all of this. One of the ways that we were able to help to cut down on the price for the cow was the farmer agreed to take off a percentage of the price, a small percentage, not that much, but every penny counts, right? And if we agreed to just go directly to sorry, I was interrupted. So the farmer agreed to take a small percentage off if we went directly to the processing company and picked the meat up on our own. And it wasn't an issue for us because it was less than an hour away. So we figured, hey, why not? So that was one way that we were able to cut back on the price. Another way, which the processing company kind of messed this part up, but just something for you to keep in mind if you choose to purchase an entire cow, just some questions that you can ask the farmer that you're purchasing from. Of course, because he has a business, fancy labels that he puts on the meats once they are processed. And, he told us that we would get a small percentage off if we just went, I guess, with the standard labels that they have at the processing company, because his had color and everything on it. And, of course, I was like, yes. And somehow I think there was some miscommunication. So that wasn't actually carried through. But on your end, something that's worth asking, right? Because that can cut back on some of the price, just the labels itself. And the other thing that was really helpful was when I called the processing company, I had no clue. Like, they were like, so how do you want it? And they had kind of like a template that they go through asking you specific questions. And I was like, I don't know, but the guy that was on the phone with me, you could tell was just like, oh my goodness, because I was asking so many questions. And you know what? No shame on my end, because I'm like, listen, we paying you this money, you can answer my questions. But after going through and trying to figure out, like, quite honestly, what cut is what, because there's certain cuts that I wasn't really familiar with or don't know that much about. Shocking, right? So I know ribeye and ground beef and some others, but he was asking me some other things, and I'm like, I'm not even sure what that is. And that was an interesting process because, like I said, at some points in time, you could tell he was a little annoyed with me. But in the end, I was really happy with how everything was processed and in a form that my family really enjoys. So they're not really big on having like multiple roasts. There was like the chuck roast that I was like, yeah, we want those. But there were other parts that, he told me, he was like, well, you have the option to make that into ground meat instead of just making it a roast. And I was like, yes, let's go with that because we love ground beef over here. So it was kind of nice to be able to communicate that and not just be stuck with all these roasts that we don't necessarily, always prefer. I mean, we'll eat it. But the other thing that I really liked was I just had them cut up a lot of the meat into fajita like style meat because again that works for our family. And I also liked being able to communicate like the sizes that I wanted the steaks cut in. And, again, for us, we have definitely our preference as far as that's concerned. The other thing, which my assumption was, okay, you're going to give me everything. I realized that I had to specify that I wanted all the organs and I also wanted the suet. And, I'm just like, listen, I paid for this. Like, that should be a given, but evidently it's not. And I actually watched other videos prior to, doing this. And, other people mentioned too. One lady, she said, she was a little bit disappointed because she didn't mention to the processing company that she wanted them to keep all of the organs. And that was what kind of put that in my head, like, ooh, make sure you mention this, Anika. So if you're choosing to order an entire cow, do not make the assumptions that if you're interested, right, that they're going to give you all the organs, because that's sometimes not the case. I was also really, and the suet. And I was also happy because I got like a lot of the soup bones as well. And I was able to even communicate to them, like, how to cut it so that I can have like easy access and all of that. So overall, it was a very good experience. And I will say this, thankfully, the processing company wasn't too far away from my home. Like I said, under an hour. And when I went, like I said, it was a few weeks ago, it was still very cool in my area. So I didn't really worry about bringing, a lot of like coolers or anything like that. And I do want to say, make sure that you ask those questions. Ask if you have to bring your own containers. The processing company that I went with, they boxed it up and everything for me because I communicated that beforehand, that I wasn't bringing my own things, and they just boxed it up. And even when I got there, they loaded it up. What we did before I went, because I went while my husband was at work, the night prior, I had just asked him to just lay everything down in our van, in our minivan, and, to just clear the trunk out and all of that to make it easier, because we had over 600 pounds of meat after it was all said and done. And it was really helpful because I just sat watch them, load the things up for me. So make sure that you're asking these questions. Do I need to bring my own containers? And if you're going to get it when it's warm, I strongly suggest that you do bring coolers. And of course, if you're buying that much meat, you obviously would need quite a few. So just some things to consider. When I actually brought it home and unloaded everything, we were able to fit. Now that was an interesting process all by itself, and I think I needed a better system to organize it all. We have a standing deep freezer, which I really, really like. And, we decided to just go ahead and get one because we're like, if we're going to continue to buy in bulk, it just makes more sense. So I was able to stuff like all the meat in that freezer. And then one of the freezers that we have inside of our home, the traditional fridge freezer kind of combo, I had cleared that out as well. And I was able to pretty much fill that up. But of course, a traditional freezer is smaller than a deep freezer. So even then I was like stuffing things inside of that freezer. So it was a lot. It was definitely a lot. But definitely, in my opinion, well worth it. And it is something that we plan to continue to do as we are able. And I'm just curious to see how long this will last us. So anyway, I just wanted to share that experience with you. And I'm curious, have you ever purchased an entire cow? And, do you have any tips for those that are interested, things that you would recommend that they do? So like I said, just wanted to share this experience with you. Hope you enjoyed it. All right, you be blessed.